What's up, family? This is Jonathan Lamb,
Candace.
and this is Life with the Lambs.
Hi.
This is Jonathan Lamb, and
Candace.
and this is Life with the. So it's so good to be with you on this Monday evening.
So good. So
here
good.
in February. This is our first Life with the Lambs for 2019, going live. This will be the first of many. We're planning on every Monday at 8 o'clock to go live. And so we're so glad to see you guys on. Winston, what's up, cousin?
What's up?
Karen and Gerald.
Hi, guys.
Kevin Johnson, what's up, man? My old classmate, man. Good to see you, bro. Pastor Leonard's on.
What's up, Leonard?
What's poppin'? So yeah, we are we're trying this thing out, man. So be kind. We're having a little bit of technical things that we're working through. We're sorting it out. But tonight we want to talk about.
Well, first of all,
we'll tell you later what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So this is Life with the Lambs. This is our first show, as Jonathan said. And we wanted to kind of tell you guys a little bit about the premise of this show. So I know a lot of people are like, well, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing now? Because I feel like we're always doing something. Life with the Lambs is a show where we tackle all kinds of topics. Jonathan and I think through conversation, came to the realization that most of our growth in life and most of the most significant shifts in our life have really happened as a result of conversation and community. So that's really what we're trying to create here. We want to create great conversation, and we want to create a safe place for people to be able to say whatever and
whatever.
Well, within reason. And
really,
we want to create a safe place for us to grow and so for everybody to get better. So we do have a really great show for you guys tonight. So if you're just getting in, come in, and when you get comfortable, please hit share. Our goal tonight is to have 25 people share this with 25 of their friends. So if you guys can help us with that, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Let's get into our first segment. Our first segment of the night is called What in the World? And that is going to be our quick news segment, and we're going to be talking about some current events in the world. And really just kind of getting our take, your take. You guys feel free to weigh in. We will communicate with you guys back and forth. I know yesterday was the Oscars, and we had a really good time watching that. So, Jonathan, what were some of the things that you really enjoyed about watching the Oscars yesterday?
Yeah, so the Oscars were popping last night. I didn't catch the whole thing, but as you know, she did. As you know, February is Black History Month, and I feel like we had a huge bunch of firsts on last night. Black Panther, they were the first Marvel movie that has ever been nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
And so, and then they had their set designer was African American. First time in history of the Oscars that an African American set designer has been not just nominated but actually won.
Right.
And then also they had just slipped my mind.
The costume designer
won as well. It was first African American costume designer that won. And so that movie, Black Panther, I don't know how many of you all have seen it, but it's been breaking records before it came out, when it came out, after it came out. I mean, it's just doing some fantastic things. And so, which I believe is really opening up the door to show just how excellent, just how, a spirit of excellence, and that really putting aside a lot of the stereotypes and stigmas of how you make it as an African American actor, actress, movie producer, all of those things. And so big ups to Black Panther. Also, Green Book did really well. They won some awards last night. I need to look at my notes.
That was a little controversial. We haven't seen the movie, but I know some people maybe felt like some other movies should have won best picture. I haven't seen it, like I said, But I was still really, really excited about the outcome yesterday. I thought it was super cool how both ladies and I want to say it was somebody else who won too for the Black Panther. Oh, the guy who won for the score. How everybody was super supportive and so grateful to Ryan Coogler, who was the director of that movie.
Right.
Ryan Coogler, he's not even, I don't even think he's 30 years old yet. This young guy comes from really humble beginnings, but this guy put all these people on and their lives are changed. Like an Oscar is a lifetime achievement. And so they were so supportive and so appreciative of that. And I was so proud of that aspect of the Oscars last night, because I was like, dude, this is what happens when we put each other on, right, and we show up for each other and we do a great job for each other. And I just thought that was really cool, really cool.
Which I also thought about, because the guy that did the score, were they roommates or they were just good friends?
They were roommates.
They were roommates. So again, going to college, sometimes you get crazy roommates and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that stuck out to me was that you just never know who you're rubbing shoulders with.
That's true.
And it's, a lot of times we're trying to size people up and all this kind of stuff. But if we are just kind to one another and build relationships with one another, you never know how those relationships are going to pan out. When you are just genuine and, like you said, supportive and working together, learning how to work together and being on each other's team, it doesn't take anything away from you, but the seeds that were sown. And it was interesting when the young man gave his speech. He was like, 12 years ago, we're in school.
Yeah.
Trying to figure things out. And here they are 12 years later, winning Oscars together and all that kind of stuff.
That's the awesome thing.
So I just want to encourage you guys, man. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on your relationships either. You know what I mean?
So true.
Never burn a bridge, because you never know when you may need to cross that bridge or someone needs to cross that bridge to you. And so, I thought it was a good testament of friendship, of endurance, all of those things, perseverance and things. So,
you know what else was really interesting? And I know this is not necessarily directly connected to Black Panther, but Chadwick Boseman. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this story, but Chadwick Boseman is. Am I saying this? But I ain't saying this. I ain't saying his last name right. Chadwick. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Anyway.
Chadwick is hurt.
So anyway, so he was growing up as a kid. He was involved with something coordinated by Debbie Allen, and he was also from humble beginnings. And Debbie Allen really saw the potential in him. And what was crazy was Debbie Allen reached out to Denzel through their mutual friendship. And Denzel sponsored Chadwick's education. And Chadwick didn't even know Denzel Washington. So how cool is that? Like he was a private sponsor. And Chadwick knew that Denzel had sponsored him, but Denzel didn't even know. Like he didn't even draw the connection. So Chadwick said that he had numerous opportunities to meet Denzel along the way, but he never wanted to meet him. Under like the circumstances that presented itself. But after he did Black Panther and it was a success and all of these things, he was like, I really wanted to just tell him, thank you for the investment into my education. Thank you for all of those things. And he said when he finally did get a chance to meet Denzel was like, so what you're saying is you owe me money. So it was really great, great interview that he did. But I was like, how huge is that? How cool is that when you have an opportunity to sow into somebody and you never know. Never know. Like Denzel, how could he have known that he was going to sow into somebody whose art was going to change the world to an equal degree as his own? Like that's awesome. Yeah. Not even counting the fact that his son is also like in the same business, getting the same kind of really on his way to getting the same kind of recognition as his dad. So I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and I mean even for that's a good segue in for Black Klansman, they won Best Screenwriter. Yeah. Spike Lee, shout outs to Spike Lee. Again, I don't know if you guys caught the speech, but something that stood out to me, Spike Lee began to talk about how I believe it was his grandmother saved her Social Security checks, like 50 of them, and used it to send him to film school. And again, just pouring in to the next generation and just believing that this may help you get to the next level or to do better. And we were having that conversation earlier today about just sowing into the next, and how a lot of times it becomes difficult. Like if you have people have a mindset of scarcity or poverty. Hey, Miss Susan. Hey, Wesley. Hey, Tanya. Hey, Cynthia. Hey, Tiffany. Sheena. What's going on? But if we have if we have a poverty mentality, we try to hold everything to ourselves, not realizing that if we hold it, it can't grow, right? And so these people have sown into the next, and now this thing is beginning to blossom. It's opening up doors. It's making waves. It's changing the narrative. It's changing all kinds of things. And I believe that not just in the entertainment industry, but just in life, whether it's education, wherever you find yourself, business, mentoring a child, just, believing in people enough to sow, right? And so especially in ministry, we were talking about ministry today, and not holding people back, but pushing them forward and giving them a platform to soar and all of those things. You never know how that thing is going to just explode and cause a revolution and be a catalyst for change in so many different ways.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Hey, Stephanie! Who am I missing? Who's that?
Dwayne Joseph, what's up?
Hi, guys!
Man of God, good to see you, man. Miss Lynn, God bless you. Carmelita, hello. Kareem, hey, man. Miss Susan, good to see you. We miss y'all. All y'all Bermuda folks, we are missing y'all.
So true. So for those of you guys who are just coming in, we just want to get you guys caught up. We're just recapping some things that happened at the Oscars. Our show tonight is going to be about boundaries. And yes, we're getting there. We're getting there. So if you guys are just getting in, make yourself comfortable. Hit the share button. Our goal tonight is to get 25 shares. So if you guys can help us with that, that is awesome.
And some likes and some hearts. And is that a heart?
You want some
I
hearts?
I feel like I'm throwing up gang signs.
Well, don't do that.
Hearts.
So, okay. So our next thing in What in the World is really a segment, our segue into our topic tonight. So, dude, in the church. This is the church is in the headlines, and so we're talking about that tonight. Here's the headline. The Catholic cardinal admits that the church destroyed documents on clergy's sexual abuse. Dude, what in the world? So, everybody knows that the Catholic Church has been plagued with sexual abuse scandals for decades. And so this Sunday, just this last week, this Sunday concluded a 4-day summit of 190 Catholic leaders, including 114 bishops from around the world. And they came together to make concrete measures to combat clergy abuse that's been plaguing the Catholic Church. So the cardinal admits, this is a quote from him, that documents that could have contained proof of clergy's sexual abuse in the Catholic Church were destroyed or never even drawn up, which is super, so unfortunate, so sad and maddening. He went on to say that the stipulated procedures and processes for the prosecution of offenses were deliberately not complied with, but instead canceled or overridden. Such standard practices will make it clear that it's not the transparency that damages the church, but rather the acts of abuse committed, the lack of transparency, or the ensuing cover-up. And they said that there's been at least 3,677 cases of child sex abuse in Germany alone, not even counting the United States, not even counting the Catholic Church in other nations. And so I was thinking about that as it pertains really to our topic for tonight. And I thought it was interesting that the cardinal says that transparency is not the issue. It is the lack it's the fact that people are abusing people and then they're trying to cover it up. Right. So who cares if, not who cares, but like, it doesn't do us any good if the victims are saying, hey, I've been victimized, somebody hurt me, but there's an active community that's trying to cover it up, or there's an active community that's not addressing it. So I was thinking about that because here's the thing, like, it's already hard enough to confront issues, especially in the church. So what do we do when we have issues that we need to confront, and confrontation either doesn't come easy to us, or when it's confronted, like, people are not owning it to really bring about solution. And a lot of that, I think, has been kind of pushed to the realm of spirituality, like, oh, we just need to pray about it, we just need to do these things. But really, there has to be a practical application, a practical response to it in order for us to move forward. And I felt like that, what was going on in the Catholic Church, is exactly the very thing. Well, the principle is the thing that happens in our everyday lives. We have things that are broken. We have things that are jacked up in our relationships. And what happens is we kind of lean towards the spirituality piece of it and not necessarily fixing the practical broken parts of it. So tonight we are talking about boundaries. How to set healthy boundaries, signs that we need to adjust the boundaries that we have, the challenges addressing boundaries in various relationships. So again, if you guys are joining us, if you're just coming in, and I see some people who are coming, if you're just coming in, come in, get comfortable, hit that share button and help us reach 25 shares, guys. And now it's time for you to weigh in. We want to hear from you guys. I did a boundary poll yesterday on Instagram. I don't know if some of you guys saw that, but I wanted to share with you some of the results from what we posted yesterday. It was very, very interesting. Ooh. Let me see here. Oh, shoot.
You got the poll.
I'm trying to pull it up. That ain't it.
So while she's getting the poll, I've been reading this book, Boundaries. This book right here, it's not new, but it's new to me. And this book has been changing my life. And it just talks about, appropriate boundaries, when to say yes, how to say no, to take control of your life. And I know for me, like, one of the things that it said in the book that really stood out to me was that a lot of times we try to create these boundaries that are walls, but the problem with that is that it doesn't allow people in, nor does it allow us to go to people. And so boundaries really are supposed to be like gates with fences. And so we're able to allow the good in and keep the bad out, and build appropriate relationships. But sometimes that's hard. And as we've been traveling from Bermuda to California to the Midwest, back to New Jersey, all over the place. And sometimes I think everyone has these relationships that some relationships you're just born into, and you have responsibilities that you didn't necessarily ask for. Sometimes we build relationships with folks, but we allow them to dictate the terms or what have you. And sometimes relationships go bad, but we don't know how to have appropriate boundaries and things of that nature. Sometimes you're in a situation where it feels like you're forced to be in this person's life because they can't do for themselves, or maybe they're getting older, or different things, and now you are taking on that responsibility. But even in taking on that responsibility, you have to have clear boundaries. And so what do you guys think about that? Like, do you out there, how many of you you struggle with boundaries, or you're frustrated sometimes because boundaries are being crossed or whatever like that? Just let us know. Shoot us a comment down below or what have you, to let us know, how do you feel? Are creating boundaries easy? Do you find it hard? Do you find them fluid sometimes? Like sometimes you feel like, man, I made this boundary, but then you kind of go back and you allow toxic things to come in or what have you. How do you feel about this subject?
So part of the poll I did yesterday was those questions.
Right.
And we had about 60 or 70 people um, respond to those questions. And I thought it was really interesting because the first question that we asked was, would you consider yourself basically to be a person who has healthy boundaries? And it was about 60% said yes, they did have healthy boundaries. It was actually 59% said yes, they had healthy boundaries. 41% said no, they didn't have healthy boundaries. And when we first started talking about this topic as something to even do on the show, I got super self-conscious because I'm like, maybe it's just me who has problems with creating boundaries with people sometimes. And I know both Jonathan and I have really been on our own journey. But then after I asked a few more questions, I found out maybe there's an opportunity for us to be a little bit more in touch with how well we are creating those boundaries. So one of the questions that I asked was, if you have a neighbor who keeps popping up around dinner time uninvited, and you want to tell them something, but they pop over again, and this is not the first time. Do you invite them in, or do you politely tell them that you're busy? Honey, what would you say?
Oh my gosh! Now after reading this book,
no. First of all, honestly, what would you say? He would be like, "Honey, do we have an extra place?"
Yeah, I probably would. As ministers, and that was kind of our challenge. So as ministers, especially when we were in Bermuda, it was just an open door policy. And so as a believer, I'm like, man, we got to feed the hungry, we got to clothe the naked, we got to do all of these things. But that doesn't necessarily mean every night, right? It doesn't necessarily mean unannounced all the time. And so you can create boundaries. We got to a place where we were literally tiptoeing through our house, turning off lights, because if the light was on, people would come by and just pop in or what have you. We even had a situation where someone came over. We're like, hey, we're on our way out and we're busy. And they sat down and just poured out their troubles to us or whatever. And we're like, oh my gosh. And so we're learning. There is a place for helping people. There is a place for sacrificing. There is a place, but there's also a place for a healthy boundary where you can do that. And they're blessed, and you're blessed. You're not burning out, and all of that kind of stuff. And so
what was an aha moment for you in your own book, in your boundaries book?
I think in this book, I had an aha moment when it talked about sometimes we are making decisions, and I'm paraphrasing, but to bless people, and we're making decisions that we think other people want us to make. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for the decisions you make. You have to stick with the consequences that come with that. And it's okay to make decisions that are going to benefit you, and you can live with that. Some people may not be happy with your decisions, but it's your decision. It's your God-given right to create a boundary and to make a decision that is going to bless you and one that you can live with. And I know that sounds probably simple to everyone and no duh, but for me, especially in ministry, it was always about, I would always sacrifice, for someone else's good. I thought that's how you had to do it. And I would do it to a place where sometimes you feel like, well, surely that's going to be reciprocated. Surely they're going to see, man, I've been doing this, all the time. I've been sacrificing for them. And then the one time you say no, it's almost like you slap their mama or something like that. And it's like, wait a minute. I've been doing everything for you. And so it does not create a healthy relationship. And so And you have, like, I had to live with a lot of those consequences. And so, so now I'm learning how to be balanced. We're always going to bless people. We're always going to, make sure that people are taken care of. We're always going to minister. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we are doing it in a healthy way. And sometimes all of this, the lack of boundaries is enabling people. So it's not really, even the decisions sometimes I was making was not actually helping them to get to a place of wholeness. It just kept them in a place of overstepping boundaries and being enabled and not facing the thing that they needed to face.
Right.
So.
I think for me in my own journey with boundaries, one of the things that I have struggled with is that even in, like, I don't know, I never consider myself to be a dumb person, but when comparatively speaking, I would be in relationships with either older people or people that I felt were more knowledgeable than I was. And so I always deferred. I would always defer to seemingly their expertise, like, oh, they know, or oh, they this, or oh, they that. And so that would kind of put me in this position, of never feeling like I was an equal, like always feeling like I had to serve the other person. And kind of like what you were saying in terms of ministry, when you're in ministry, there is an expectation of serving, but that doesn't always translate well to everywhere else, even though we believe that principle in our faith. But, like, I found myself going into work relationships with coworkers who were supposed to be my peers, but because I didn't know how to set correct boundaries, like because they were an elder or because they were a supervisor or whatever, I would kind of like put myself under, and I did not have healthy work boundaries, and so I found that it was like I was kind of taking the relationship that I had with my parents, and I'm applying that same kind of honor to every other kind of relationship of authority, and it really should change. It really does need to change. But and especially like, but if we're honest, if you're a person who grew up in the church like we did, like that relationship with your parents and the relationship with your pastor, like both cultures kind of expect the same thing. Like you're supposed to, like, this is my dad in the faith, and whatever he says goes, and whatever. And so it is hard to create these boundaries for you to be able to think your own thoughts, to make your own decisions, to make your whatever, and to set those healthy boundaries. Am I the only person who deals with that? What are they saying?
So Tiffany said, boundaries are important. They create clear expectations.
So true. And I think even too, like, I have been guilty of allowing other people to set the boundaries. Like there is this perception that I've had of myself that, okay, I can take it. Other people, they like, I'm a strong personality. So you guys do whatever you're gonna do, and then I will just respond to whatever that is. So if you're gonna give me the short end of the stick, I don't care. I can make it anyway. If you're gonna whatever, you know what I mean? Like always living responsibly and not necessarily creating that proactive boundary that says, that's okay. If you're not thinking about me, I'm thinking about me, and this is the space that I need, or these are the guidelines that I need to feel healthy, to feel respected. You know what I mean? To ensure a mutual respect.
Absolutely. And I think too that there's also internal boundaries, right? And a lot of times when I used to think about boundaries, I'm thinking about things that keep me out of a certain space. But it's not a wall. It's not a get back type thing. It's a being healthy to be able to open up, to have good relationships, to talk through things, and to receive the good things that people have, to be able to give out the good things that you have for people or whatever.
Yeah.
But then also to be able to close things off, to say, this is toxic right here.
Right.
And so I don't have to submit to this, or I don't have to do that. But also, sometimes there's internal boundaries from mental models, and you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't be this. And many times we have closed ourselves off to thoughts and ideas and things that are actually for us.
Yeah.
Right? Because we assume, oh, I can't do that, or they're not going to agree with that, or what have you. And it even talks about in our own mind, we have to give ourselves permission to think and to go there, even if we're not going to act on those thoughts or what have you. Pastor Leonard said, boundaries help us steward time correctly and not waste it. That is so good, man. That is so true, because a lot of times when we allow people to come across our boundaries, it turns into a distraction. And so while we are working on other people's things sometimes, we let the thing that we are actually supposed to be doing go and become delayed. And next thing you know, a year has gone. 5 years has gone. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Dude, I'll tell you this. I remember in my younger years, being faced with this, like having friends in my life who would call me to help with their project, knowing that we were both in the same place. Like, you have something you need to do, I have something I need to do, but you're going to ask me to help you with yours, which is fine. But I would help people with their stuff to my own detriment. Yep. To the fact where I'm staying up, overnight trying to get something done, or I've loaned out money that was allocated for something else. Right. I loaned it out because somebody else is in a jam, not even considering the fact that when I do this, like, I am not going to be okay if they don't come through. And unfortunately, probably more times than not, they didn't come back with that money, and then you're just out. But what is that? What is that in us? Yeah. What is that?
It's so interesting, because as Christians, a lot of time we're taught, like, you just got to give. You just got to give, and God will give back to you. But you also have to be obedient, right? And so the Lord is not telling us to give out of what we don't have. And sometimes we feel this pressure, even in some church services, you hear the man and woman of God and say, give. I hear the Lord saying give, or this or that. And I used to have people come to me and they say, what do I do, Jonathan? I don't have it, but I feel guilty not giving, and I feel guilty not. And that's why you have to know within your own self. You have to have your own boundaries, because the Bible says never give out of compulsion. Never give. And we use that for money, but that's also time.
That's true.
Don't give out of compulsion. Don't give out of guilt. Don't let somebody guilt you into doing something. Don't let somebody guilt you into taking them across town and all this kind of, you know what I mean? And taking you away from the very thing that you know you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. If any of this resonates with you guys, hit the like button, hit the heart button, or whatever, because I'm like, there's been so many things that I have done feeling guilty. Yeah. And then when I come back and I'm like, God, how come this is not working out for me? He was like, I didn't tell you to do that.
Dude, I'll tell you.
I didn't, you have to prepare. You have to prepare for it. You have to keep your boundaries so that you can be obedient to what your assignment is.
But I'll tell you what. I'll tell you this argument that has worked against me in the past. The people who are like, you're supposed to be a Christian. Right. You're supposed to be this. You're supposed to be that. And they always, they know what you're supposed to be better than you. I'm like, it finally got to a point where I was like, now wait a minute. Now you ain't been saved not one day in your whole life, but who gave you the manual on what Christians are supposed to do and be? For you to be able to tell me with conviction, with great conviction, how I'm supposed to be governing myself within my faith. And so I did have to create that boundary, but for a while, that argument was beating me up, because I'm like, you're right. But if we're not careful, those things will be used as manipulation against us, to coerce us, to, like you said. And so, we really do have to be able to start taking personal inventory of what's going on inside of us. Yeah. Am I doing these things because I desire to do them? Right. Or am I doing them because there is this you should or you have to? And like in my own journey, I feel like for years I have lived my life doing only what I have to do. And that sucks. Like, what kind of life is that?
Right.
What kind of life is only doing what you have to do? Now, of course, I'm not talking about the things that require being responsible as an adult, but there are so many cultural expectations or community expectations depending on the church you go to, or depending on your group of friends, or
Your
depending on the
environment.
family that you
Yeah.
belong to. There are all of these expectations that kind of govern us. They shift us here and there, really without our say so a lot of the time.
And let me say this. A lot of times those things, those boundaries that were created, right, are not necessarily people saying you have to do this.
Most times.
But sometimes it's just the environment. It's just, we don't do that. We don't live that way. That's for them to do. Or there's these unspoken things that have kept us closed. They're the unspoken things that kept us in a place when we have dreams and desires to try something new. We have dreams and desires to do something different. There's interest. Sometimes we have interests that we won't even share with our family and friends because we know that that culture is not in favor of that. And so a lot of times we put our life on delay because we are afraid to break out of a boundary that has boxed us in, right?
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage you. Some of you, you have things in your heart that you may not even know, like for sure, like this is what I want to do, but there's an interest there. But you're afraid to even go there because sometimes the environment around us laughs at it. It squawks at it. It looks at us side-eyed or whatever. I remember for years wanting to do movies, but I was like, I can't be a preacher and do movies and all this kind of stuff. And it took me a long, long time to even write my first book because not that anyone said I couldn't, but it was just the pressure of things that I heard and things that I thought and the way that no one else in my circle was doing that. And sometimes with those boundaries, again, they're fences. So sometimes you got to wade out and get into an environment that is doing the thing that you desire.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're stuck because we are not around people that will encourage us or in an environment that will encourage us to be those things. And so I think that as a community, as we are creating our own boundaries, I think we also have to respect other people's boundaries.
Well, I was reading in another book of mine that said that if you are a person who feels like people are not respecting your boundaries or you have a hard time setting proper boundaries, odds are you also have issue with honoring other people's boundaries. So it's like, you know, if you can't set a boundary, you can't keep a boundary. And when I read that, I was like, dang, ooh, is that me? Because I know I do have a hard time setting boundaries sometimes. But it's not just, you can't just be a victim of it. Like if we don't understand how boundaries work, sometimes we're an offender and the offended.
Right.
So that was really good. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking is how much we can live really based off of assumption.
Right.
And we're assuming what this culture will allow because of what we've seen and because of what we've experienced. Oh, we don't do that because I haven't seen it done. Oh, we don't try these things because I haven't heard anybody try it. Or I mentioned it and it got a laugh or something like that.
Or people tell you how expensive it is and how dangerous it is. And, oh, man, you really want to do that?
Right.
Well, I did. Until you said something.
You said something. But like honestly, I even with myself, I've been praying and just asking God, like, Lord, give me a holy curiosity, like, you know what I mean. And I don't mean holy like circumspect, like, you know what I mean, but really just a curiosity that goes beyond the pressure of my culture. You know what I mean? Like, there are some things that I'm just interested in, and nobody else in my family cares about it, but that's okay. And the hardest thing about going against what the culture is doing is the internal struggle. I think that's the hardest thing. You can decide that you're going to go that way, but I think many times there is a guilt associated with doing something different, with being separate in that sense. And that was actually something else that I had read in this book. So Jonathan has been reading this book, the Boundaries book. Okay,
get it?
Yes, it's really good. So
what's up, Jimmy?
I haven't started it, but I've been
Nick.
reading,
what's up, Frat?
I've been reading this book, The Emotionally Healthy Church, and it talks a lot about boundaries too. And one of the points that it made, the author is Peter Scazzaro. One of the points that he makes in this book is that we have a hard time being together and separate at the same time as individuals, not as a married couple. We have a hard time within our community being together in a community but separate. So when we're together, we become possessive of each other. I laugh and joke because I have girlfriends who are like, they never want me to say that I have another friend because they like, who that? Like, but that is a sign of emotional maturity. Like how well we can be together and be separate in our healthy spaces.
Yeah.
We've even addressed that in our marriage, us being able to be a unit. We are one, but how do we work when we are apart from each other? How does that look like, and is that healthy?
Right. And sometimes in our marriage, like there's been times when the Lord has told Candace, like you just need to rest, and you need to, you need to wait on some things, and you need to just get alone and have, slow down and all that kind of stuff. While at the same time, the Lord's speaking to me about you need to get it together. You need to start moving on some things, and you need to. And at first, it was kind of hard because I want her to move with me, and she wants me to rest with her. And sometimes the Lord, again, has us moving at different paces or handling different things, so that when it's time to move together, we are equally yoked. We are in a place where we are strengthened in the areas that we're supposed to be strengthened in. And but if you're like looking at, it reminds me of the story where Jesus comes to Mary and Martha's house.
Yeah.
And Mary's sitting at Jesus' feet and receiving or whatever. Martha's cooking up the collard greens and the mac and cheese in the back, and she's doing all kinds of stuff, and she's not hearing nothing that Jesus has to say, but she's serving him.
Yeah. Right?
And she's like, Jesus, like, why don't you tell Mary to get up? And he's like, listen, you are troubled by many things.
Yeah.
But Mary has chosen the good part. And so sometimes we're doing different things, but we have to, and both things are needed, but not always at the same time. And so,
dude, that is the truth. That is the truth. I was just having another conversation with a friend of mine today. Power Girl, actually.
Jimmy says the emotional healthy leader.
Oh, yeah. So I was having a conversation, and we were talking about the same thing. We were talking about it in the context of church. How many of us have been in church, and you're hearing a message, and you're like, dang, this is hitting me. This is hitting me. Like, I need to do some self-work on me. But at the same time, you're kind of side-eyeing somebody else, and you're like, this is really what you need too. And they're like, right over their head. Like, they are not connecting with this message at all. And we were laughing about it because there is something in us that wants people to work when we're working. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't focus on ourselves. And when we start talking about focusing on our own growth, now all of a sudden it's like, well, we're a church body, we're the body of Christ. Yes, that is true. But at some point, there has got to be a sense of ownership for your own space and what's going on with you. Right. We have to be responsible for our own growth. And that is hard because there have been times when I'm like, I'm super inspired. I'm like reading books. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to a sermon. every minute of the day. And I'm trying to share it with Jonathan, and he's like, I'm cool. And I'm like, what kind of Christian are you?
She's judgy.
And like, I really had to grow up. Like, Jonathan, like, that's not where he was right then.
I was further along.
Now listen, I'm not going to even go there. I'm not going to.
I had already dealt with that stuff.
Whatever.
I was miles up the road.
Whatever. But we were in different places.
Yeah,
we were in different places. And it's like, how do we grow together when we're not doing the same thing?
Right.
And what does that look like? Like, seriously, what does that look like? What does that look like in your household? And certainly, what does that look like in your church? I think I think sometimes we adopt this immature point of view that everybody has got to be in the same place because that's fair.
Right.
But that's not true. That's not true. There are some people who are further along in their walk with the Lord. There are some people who are just beginning, and that's okay. But there is this feeling that nobody wants to feel like they're behind. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to feel like they're a beginner. Nobody wants to feel like they're a junior anything. Nobody wants to feel
or let the Lord tell you to sacrifice and go on a 30-day fast while everyone else is eating. And you're like, wait a minute.
Everybody needs
y'all
to
are
be
not
fast.
saved. Y'all are not this. Y'all not that. But again, it's the Lord knows how to grow us. The Lord knows exactly what we need, when we need it, how we need it, at the time that we need it. And we really do have to get to a place where we got to get the plank out of our eye so that we can get the little splinter out of somebody else's. And really it's not even about getting the splinter out all the time as much as it is us growing.
Yes.
Us growing.
Yes.
And so that when we go to get the splinter out, we know how to do it with compassion. We know how to do it with, you know what I'm saying? Because...
And I feel like, just to that, I feel like sometimes we treat that as if getting the splinter out is the priority of our life. But...
we're dying with a plank in our eye.
I think that getting the plank out of our own eye takes a lot of lifetime to do. But sometimes we be trying to rush so quick to get to the splinter in somebody else. But like, we have a whole lifetime where the Bible talks about the whole objective of our salvation is being saved to the conversion of our soul. It's being transformed into the image of Jesus Christ. That takes a lifetime. That takes a lifetime. So it's not like I'm dealing with this season of whatever so I can accurately deal with it in somebody else's life. Dude, if you work on you, you have a testimony that inspires others. You have a testimony that empowers others to take the same steps that you took to get healed.
And man, take the time. Like, even with this book, we've been kind of sharing notes between the two books or whatever. But the Emotionally Healthy Church, Pastor Jimmy also talked about the Emotionally Healthy Leader.
Yeah.
Which
I heard great things about that book too.
Where we Candace and I have been looking at that as well. But I'm telling you, like, a lot of times we're so quick to, like, the Lord will download something to us today, and we want to release it 30 seconds from now. You know what I mean? But like, take time to get healed. Take time to figure out your boundaries. Take time to sharpen. Stephen Covey talked about sharpening the saw or whatever. And sometimes we are running, but we are running tired, and we are running dull, and we are running to the end of ourselves because we won't take time to create proper boundaries. We won't take time to think through some of the things that we've been through. We won't take time to submit to the process. We just want to prove to everyone that we're okay. Yeah. And it's not that you're not okay, but if you don't take time, you won't be okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so these boundaries, it's really a bigger subject than what I initially thought. Because I'm like, y'all in my space. Y'all need to back up. But it's really like, there's some internal stuff. There's some internal boundaries. There's some internal things that have held me back, just not thinking it was people, but really it was my own mindset. It was my own issues. It was my own challenges. Sometimes you're just tired and you need to rest. Sometimes you need to just say no, not because you can't, but because you need to refuel.
Yeah.
Right? And some of you, when we get to a place where we're ready to quit, we're ready to throw in the towel. We're like, man, the enemy's after me and all this and really what it is you're tired. And you need to rest. You remember Elijah, after he has this great moment, he calls fire down from heaven. He proves to the nation that God is God. They slay all these prophets and all this kind of stuff. And then one woman says, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, oh my God, I want to die. And the thing was, he just came off of victory. He's not weak. He's not all of these things, but he's tired. And so the first thing that God does is puts him to sleep.
Yeah.
Gives him something to eat, puts him to sleep. He wakes back up. He feeds him again, puts him back to sleep. Mm-hmm. Wakes up again, feeds him again, and then says, now you're ready for this journey. And now I need you to go and speak into the next generation. And sometimes, I don't know, I just sense that some of you may feel like you're in a holding pattern. You may feel like things are not moving the way they're supposed to move or as quick as they're supposed to move. And you're like, God, I'm ready. God, I'm ready. God, and the Lord's like, no, I need you to rest for a minute because this next journey is going to take more energy. This next journey is going to have more battles. This next journey, you have to do something to catapult the next generation. And I need you to be healthy. Yeah. I need you to be rested. I need you to be strong. And I need you not to be feeling some kind of way because now I'm using you to anoint someone else. All of those things. Sometimes we got to work out our own emotional baggage and our own rejection, our own things that have been holding us back. And now God wants us to minister, but we can't because we still have unresolved issues.
I know, well, some of you guys know I was battling with Bell's palsy for the last couple of months. And up until this, and prior to that, Jonathan and I went through a season of tragedy back to back to back. Unfortunately, I lost my baby brother suddenly, and then I lost my mom, and then Jonathan lost his sister. And I remember the year, I lost my brother in July, my mom in August. And the end of that year, I remember posturing myself like, you know what, I'm going to go into next year and I'm just going to focus, I'm going to hustle, I'm going to pour myself into my work because, if I don't, I'm just going to be sad and I'm going to be all of these things. And I remembered trying to carve out time to put my schedule together and to figure out what books I'm going to read and all these things because I wanted to be super productive in my time of grief. And I remember part of my goal was I wanted to spend my mornings with God to, get some insight. Just, give me, just that morning devotion, and I wanted to be faithful with that. And I started out, and every morning I would come, I would pray, and I would read my scripture, and I would fall asleep. And I'm like, dang it, shoot, try to get tomorrow. I'm going to get up in the morning, I read my scripture, I pray, but in my prayer, I fall asleep. And then it happened probably for about a week. And I was like, what in the world? This is not typical for me. And so, finally, the Lord was like, you need to rest. And I'm like, God, I'm not understanding what you're saying. He was like, Candace, you need to rest. And so I'm like, are you saying I need to take a nap? Do I need to incorporate a nap into my day? Are you talking about, do I need to take a few days off of work? And he says, Candace, you need to rest. You need to rest. And so he kept on hitting that point, and he took me to the Old Testament when it started talking about the Sabbath and what the Sabbath was all about and how I needed to give my body a break. I needed to allow myself time to grieve. I needed to create different margins in my life. But I realized through my process that the reason why I live with such tight margins is because I felt like I was always trying to prove myself to people. I felt like I was always the underdog. Remember I said, whenever I would come into relationships with people, I would always prefer them above myself. But that was not because I was actually preferring them from a genuine place. It was because I did not think highly of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we are doing the right thing with the wrong thing in our heart.
Right.
And so on paper it looks right, but it's not really right.
Our motives are off.
And so I'm living my life with no margin because I'm constantly trying to prove myself to myself. I'm trying to prove my worth to myself. I'm trying to prove my devotion to the Lord. I'm trying to prove my devotion to my fellow ministers. Like all of these things. And the Lord's like, hey, I need you to rest. And so when we moved from California to here, it was like, now you don't have to go to work every day. Now you are in a place where you can rest, but still I found things to do. You know what I mean? Like I would not create those boundaries. And then we come back from a time of traveling and all this stuff, and boom, Bell's palsy hits. And for me, it was a trigger of a poor immune system, and it was a combination of that and stress because I'm not adjusting my margins. And so I keep hitting that wall, and that's just my own personal thing. You keep hitting that thing because at some point you're like, I've got to create boundaries that work for me. And the boundaries that work for me may not work for everybody around me. And that's not just because I'm trying to be a jerk. It's not because I'm going to another level so everybody can't come with me kind of thing. It's like, I gotta be healthy.
Right.
And these are the things that are going to ensure my well-being, to be all that I can be for myself, all that I can be for my husband, all that I can be for my church family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
like, that rest it includes physical rest. It includes creating that margin, but it's also a resting in the work of God.
Yeah.
It's resting in what Jesus Christ has done. He says that we are accepted in the beloved, but so many times we're trying to be accepted. We're trying to do this, and we're trying to let the Lord know, I'm not lazy, God. I'm working for you, God. I'm trying, and it's this constant, we're running on all of these treadmills.
Yeah.
And the Lord's like, just rest.
Take it easy.
Take it easy. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean be lazy. It doesn't mean that you don't take care of your priorities and responsibilities. But it's resting that we are co-laborers with God.
Right.
We are heirs of God and joint heirs with Jesus Christ. He doesn't leave us.
Right. He's
working with us, but a lot of times we are running at 100, trying to get it done, trying to prove something, trying to get on the next platform and all. And the Lord's like, I'm going to get you there. I'm going to take you there. I'm going to place you there. Right. And we're just running crazy.
We treat Jesus like he's the assistant of our faith.
Right.
Okay, God, I'm going to go do this. You cover me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And sometimes we're allowing people to speak into that.
Yeah.
We're allowing old traditions to speak into that. And again, that's where you have to decide, is this, with this gate, with this boundary, is this something I need to let in, or is this something I need to keep out? Yeah. And as we begin to think through those things, because it's not easy, Sister Lynn was saying that balancing your space is an art and comes with time and experience, not necessarily an easy task. Very true. You have to protect your mind and your heart. And the thing is, that's absolutely right. You have to. Yeah. But a lot of times we feel guilty for protecting our heart and our mind.
You feel like a jerk.
Yeah.
You're like, it's like you cannot create a boundary. When you're surrounded with people who do not believe in creating boundaries themselves, when you create the boundary, it's never received in the spirit of a healthy boundary. You know what I'm saying? People are offended. What do you mean no? What do you mean you're not gonna come? What do you mean you're not gonna be at service for the 16th time this week? What do you mean you're not gonna be at prayer? What do you mean you're not gonna do this for the family? What do you mean? Yeah. And I think that is hard. Yeah. That is hard because you got to be okay with it in your heart, because other people, sadly, they're not. And this is always going to be, it's for a lot of us, this is always going to be a point of contention until we until we establish it.
Right. And that's the thing is what I was going to say. Initially, they won't.
Yeah.
Right. However, I think it's important to know that. It's important to know that you're supposed to create boundaries. It's up to you to protect your heart and your mind, like all of those things, right? But you also need to know that there's going to be resistance initially. But once you create that boundary, people will respond.
That's true.
People will respect it. But you have to stay consistent.
That is true. That is true.
So what do you guys think? Was this a good discussion about boundaries, about being healthy? We're about an hour in. We don't want to go too much longer. But what do you guys think about this? Weigh in on boundaries, on anything, or what's in your heart about any of this stuff or something else or what have you.
Yep. So we are going to wrap up this episode for tonight. Thank you guys for all of your feedback, and thank you for continuing.
What's up, Marlon?
Hey.
Our old roommate's on.
Thank you for helping us to reach our goal of
Ethorn's on too.
Hey, Ethor!
What's up, man?
Thank you for helping us reach our goal of 25 shares. So if you haven't shared it with your friends,
you got it?
No, not yet.
Oh, come on, y'all
hey,
share.
I'm saying it in faith. Hey, thank God.
Hey.
25 likes tonight, and if you guys have things that you want to talk about, things that you want to add to this conversation once you see it, please hit us up at lifewiththelambs@gmail.com. Or if there's another topic that you would like for us to tackle, hit us up at lifewiththelambs@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Facebook.
Yeah, hit us in the comments below as well, and we will respond to that. So I know that a lot of times when we're talking or whatever, like it's hard to be super interactive, but if you guys put things down in the comments, we will respond, and I think it will help because I know all of y'all that are on here, I know most of you guys, and you have things to say.
That's what I know.
You have things that you've already walked through or whatever. What's up, Power Girl? Just came on.
Hey, girl.
All of those things. So put some things in the comments. Put comments in the comments. Or even put other topics that you think we need to talk about that's not necessarily being talked about so that we can begin to have a conversation about these things. I hope this was helpful. If any of this was helpful tonight, hit like or hit the heart button or whatever. Let us know. Let us know what you guys think. Let us know the areas that you are working in as far as creating good boundaries.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys next week, Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Atlantic. Thanks for watching Life with the Lambs.
Peace. Gotta figure out how to end it.
We can't figure out how to
We don't
end
know how to go.
it.
We don't want to go. We don't want to leave.